They say the world looks different when your heart is calm, brighter skies, softer air, kinder moments. But sometimes, it's on the calmest days that life cracks open and shows you something you never expected. Something that makes you question whether kindness still exists, or whether the people we trust the most can also be the ones who hurt us the deepest. This story begins on an afternoon so warm, so harmless, that no one could imagine the storm waiting inside a school hallway. And when Rowan Carver, a gentle father who had already survived life's hardest losses, stepped through those doors thinking he was just dropping off his daughter's forgotten lunch, he had no idea he was walking into a moment that would change him forever. If you believe the world still needs compassion, if you believe every child deserves safety, then stay with me till the end, because what Rowan discovered will break your heart, and then remind you why kindness matters more than ever. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Lunchbox. It happened on a warm, bright afternoon, the kind where sunlight filters through trees like gold, where birds sing as if the world has agreed to be gentle for a few hours. Rowan Carver stepped out of his old truck holding a purple lunchbox decorated with little stars, the one his 12-year-old daughter Arya had forgotten on the kitchen counter. He smiled softly to himself. She had been distracted that morning, her brow furrowed as though she was thinking about something she couldn't quite say. But Rowan didn't press her. He was a single father who had learned, painfully and slowly, that children often hide their storms behind quiet smiles. After losing his wife 2 years earlier, he had rebuilt his life around tenderness, braiding Arya's hair each morning, cooking her favorite breakfasts even on exhausted days, whispering promises of safety that came from a heart that had been shattered but never hardened. As he walked into the school, lunchbox swinging gently at his side, something felt off. The halls were unusually still, the kind of quiet that feels heavy rather than peaceful. Rowan's steps slowed, his chest tightened with a father's instinct, the strange, uneasy sense that something wasn't right. When he reached Arya's classroom door, the sound that met him almost stopped his breath. It was Arya's voice, but thinner, trembling, holding back tears she didn't want anyone to hear. Rowan froze, gripping the doorframe. Inside, students sat rigid, wide-eyed, and silent. Arya stood a few feet from her desk, hands clasped tightly to her chest, shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. Towering over her was Ms. Halden, her teacher, face sharp with anger, voice slicing through the air like broken glass. Rowan couldn't comprehend it at first. Arya wasn't the kind of child who caused trouble. She was gentle, soft-spoken, the type who apologized even for things she didn't do. Yet here she was, shrinking under the fury of an adult who should have protected her. Ms. Halden raised her hand. Not to strike, but in a gesture stiff and forceful enough to make every child flinch. Rowan's heart twisted painfully. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. He just stared at his daughter, his sweet, fragile Arya, trembling like a frightened bird. He stepped into the room slowly, each movement careful as if the wrong word might shatter her completely. Silence fell instantly. Arya's eyes snapped up, glassy with tears she hadn't allowed to fall. Ms. Halden straightened awkwardly, startled by his presence. But Rowan didn't look at her. He crossed the room, knelt down, and gently placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. She inhaled sharply, as if his touch finally gave her permission to breathe again. He scanned her face, reading the story in the small tremors of her lips, the red rims of her eyes, the way she leaned ever so slightly toward him like someone reaching for a lifeline. In that moment, guilt crashed over him. How long had she been scared like this? How many days had she come home quiet and withdrawn because she was hiding this hurt? He remembered the mornings she hesitated before school, the way she sat longer in her room at night, the fragile smile she wore as if she were trying to shield him. He had assumed it was the usual pressures of growing up. Now he realized he hadn't been listening closely enough. And the ache of that realization settled deep in his bones. Ms. Halden began explaining herself, her words stiff, defensive, something about missing work, about classroom expectations, about children needing discipline. But Rowan heard none of it. All he heard was Arya's shaky breathing. All he saw was the tiny, broken expression on her face. He stood slowly and finally turned to face the teacher. He did not shout, though a lesser man might have. Instead, his voice came out steady, low, and filled with the kind of quiet strength that made every child sit straighter. He told her no child should ever be reduced to fear, especially not by someone meant to guide them. Not ever. His words did not rise, but the weight of them echoed through the room like thunder. Moments later, the principal arrived. Rowan explained exactly what he had witnessed, calmly but firmly, speaking not from anger, but from the deep ache of a father who had seen his child's spirit wounded. The principal listened, truly listened, and something in her expression shifted with concern. Actions were promised, steps were taken, and when Rowan and Arya finally stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, she leaned into him with a trembling exhale. He didn't ask her to explain. He simply wrapped an arm around her shoulders, wishing he could take every ounce of pain into himself. Chapter 2: The Aftermath of Silence. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence that had filled Arya's classroom. This silence was fragile, like a glass bubble floating gently through the air, waiting for the right moment to break. Rowan kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting close to Arya, not touching her, but near enough that she could reach for him whenever she needed. She stared out the window, watching trees blur past. Her fingers traced the edge of the lunchbox, the one he had brought to her just minutes before the world inside her classroom shifted. When they reached home, the moment they stepped inside, Arya finally spoke. Not in long explanations or detailed stories, just small, broken pieces of truth that slipped out like tiny cracks in a dam. She told him she had been trying her best. That no matter what she did, Ms. Halden always found fault in it. That she felt stupid, scared, and trapped, like she could not breathe in that classroom. Rowan listened. He didn't interrupt. Every word she uttered was another weight pressed onto his heart, another reminder of how pain can hide in the quiet spaces of a child's life. He sat with her at the kitchen table for hours, letting her speak only when she wanted to, letting silence fill the rest. He learned about the days she cried in the bathroom, about the notebooks she tore pages out of because she was afraid they weren't good enough, about the mornings she wished she didn't have to go to school. Each revelation felt like a bruise on his soul, but beneath the heartbreak, Rowan felt something else growing: resolve. A fierce, unwavering promise that his daughter would never again suffer in silence, not while he still had breath to protect her. Over the next days, meetings were held. Investigations unfolded. Other students quietly admitted they had felt the teacher's anger too, but were too afraid to speak until they saw Rowan step into that classroom with courage and calm. Ms. Halden was placed under review. Changes were made, and slowly, the school became a place Arya could breathe in again. She switched classrooms, found a new teacher who welcomed her gently, and her smile, once dim and fading, began to return with soft, hopeful light. But the biggest change didn't happen at the school. It happened inside their home, inside Rowan's relationship with his daughter. Their conversations grew deeper. Their bond strengthened. Rowan learned to look beyond her silences, to see the signals she didn't know how to express. Arya, in turn, learned that she didn't have to guard her heart alone, that she could lean on him without fear of burdening him. What happened in that classroom became a scar, not one that weakened them, but one that shaped them into something stronger. On another warm afternoon weeks later, Rowan picked Arya up from school. She climbed into the car, smiling, a real smile this time, bright and open. Rowan watched her, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. As they drove home, Arya reached out and gently slipped her hand into his. He squeezed it softly, understanding the message she wasn't saying out loud. She was healing, and so was he.